Hi, this is Shilpa here. Welcome to my blog. So this is a case of a child with croup and vomiting. But let me tell you how it all started. So it started. I saw this child. I think about a month and a half back, and that was so. This was an 11-month baby, and the parents had been to India in December during the summer break, and at that point, since they've been back, since January, so basically for the last um, few months or 4 or 5 months, um, he's been having problems. So, you know, right since the time they landed back in Sydney, he had this congestion in chest and vomiting that went on and on for about 3 to 4 weeks. So every time, they went to the doctor and the doctor said there is a tummy bug. Sometimes antibiotics were prescribed, sometimes they were not. And he started having these, fever every time he felt sick. And it's now been about 4 or 5 months. Even when he's not coughing, he will vomit out whatever he's eaten at least once or twice a day. So it's now become a norm. Like he vomits mostly all day, every day. And then in between every 2 weeks, he gets these coughs and colds, and then he vomits every time he coughs. And suddenly the sleep pattern has changed. He was sleeping quite well, and now, like, they spend nights when he's not sleeping, he's restless, tossing and turning, and so the cycle continues. Cough, then fever, then vomiting, and then every 1 or 2 weeks he's not well. So it was a nightmare for the parents, the moms were sleep deprived. I mean, his sleep wasn't completely okay. Like, he was a restless baby, but this was like really intense. So even I went on, what else bothers you? And then she said his appetite is fine, but he's not gaining weight. So she was concerned, like he was vomiting his food, and she used to measure. So because he vomits a lot, she's not started any solids. So the child is about turning 1 soon, and she's still giving him pureed food, and he's not actually eating solids in that way. I mean, he's not eating a normal meal, big chunks of food. He's eating solids, but it's a pureed food. So he's extremely restless even when he's sleeping. Even otherwise, he keeps crawling. She says, he keeps on crawling the whole day. He suddenly vomits, and then we don't even know. We can't pick up any cues, and he just vomits. So we're changing his nappy, and then he vomits. So sometimes after a meal, he seems to be uncomfortable, and then he vomits, and then he starts smiling again. So otherwise, before this whole thing started, he was a happy child. But now when he laughs so hard, and then he vomits. So even when he's sick, he does not stop smiling, which was the best part. But he doesn't want to be held. She says he hates this changing time. He just can't do what he wants to do, and I think he wants to be free. And then mom has tears in her eyes. So I said, talk about that. And she said, I was like that. I'm still like that. I'm at home since he was born, and I feel guilty to sit down and relax. And I'm bored if I sit at home. I love traveling. I've traveled half the world, and I think he's similar. He wants to explore. He's bored in one place. And we go to other people's houses, and we see other kids, and they can play for hours in that little play area, and we are amazed. I mean, even as a baby, when he couldn't even hold his neck, he could stretch out and look around what's beyond the bassinet. So he has always been a very curious child. And then she said his sleeplessness. He wakes up in the middle of the night and he wants to play. So the peculiar thing was that it's not like he's cranky and he's whining and he's restless. In fact, he doesn't want to sleep because he wants to play. And so he said, we try everything in the sleep book. We drive him for hours and he doesn't sleep. We're driving all the way up and down the Silver Water Road, and then he sleeps. We come home and suddenly he's awake. So finally, when he's asleep, he could then sort of have He mentioned that it was a colic sort of a thing because he cries in sleep without reason, and then he passes a lot of wind, and then he starts feeling better. Now, by the time I got this whole history, the child was getting very restless because he had sort of played whatever toys were in the clinic room, and everything now was on the floor, and the father was out in the backyard and trying to settle him, and so I couldn't actually spend a lot of time further on. So all I got was a bit of a family history. The mother had tuberculosis as a child. She also had allergic rhinitis from dust and perfume. Grandmother had allergic bronchitis, and grandfather had myocardial infarct, which was hyperlipidemia. Dad was fine. He didn't have any chronic issues at this moment. So that was what I got. Now, I had a couple of analysis in my mind. I knew where the direction I was going here, but I needed more time. So what I did was I said, all right, I have this important. So I was working here at stage 3, obviously, because there were really peculiar emotional, mental, and physical generals that we could work around. And the major thing for me was this sudden vomiting, this easy vomiting. Like he could just no cues, and out of the blue he would vomit, and it was so easy. There was no nausea. There was nothing which actually brought it on. And then on the other hand, this mental state of this really restless child who was quite active, quite happy, playful, but he was exploring, this curious child who could not sleep and wanted to play. So based on this, and based on my experience, I knew where I was looking at, right? But at that point, I wanted some time to make and prescribe the right remedy for him. So I said, all right, let's give you an intercurrent. Now, before I went there, these were the two things I was looking at. So let's look at the coffee family and Ipecac. So I looked at the first thing, which was this real activity during sleep. And the strongest remedy which comes up there is coffee. Now, if you look at coffee, you have sleeplessness from activity of the mind, your sleeplessness from mental conditions. You have, all the senses are more acute, and, particularly there is unusual activity of mind and body, full of ideas, quick to act, no sleep on account of this. Let's look at, I tried to put in play and sleep. I wanted to see what remedies come up with, child who wants to play and cannot sleep. And down here, I see some important, interesting remedies here. And look at coffee here. The child is very excitable, playful and sleepless. It seems as if it could not sleep. It frets and worries in an innocent manner, is not cross but sleepless. So there is the state of overactivity of the mind and the body and this inability to sleep. Now, it's not just about the coffee as a remedy, but it's the entire coffee family, which is the Rubiaceae family, where you see as a group analysis this hyperexcitability state which comes up very strongly. That was one part of the story. Now let's come to this analysis of the state where there is the vomiting issue there, right? So let's look at what's happening there. Okay, so let's look at the vomiting issue here. So I put in 3 important rubrics: easy vomiting, vomiting nausea without, and sudden vomiting. And what you see here is Ipecac. Now, even without putting all these, the remedy which was in my mind was Ipecac. Now, interestingly, Ipecac also belongs to the coffee family. So now I was considering, well, we have the coffee as a remedy, which has this strong affinity on the sleep and also on the emotional and the mental aspect of the patient. And then we have Ipecac as a remedy, which has this strong affinity for the gastric, on the GIT, and this inclination to vomit, plus it has this combination of respiratory issues with gastric problems together as a bundle. So Now, this was based on my materia medica knowledge and from looking at the repertories and studying the materia medica of these two remedies. And I was unsure which one to actually proceed with. Part of me wanted to go with Ipecac, but I didn't really see a lot of sleep from excessive emotional and mental activity in Ipecac in the provings. But a part of me said, well, it belongs to the coffee family and it should incorporate what is common for the entire family theme. On the other hand, I wasn't quite sure coffee had a strong specific sphere of action on this ability to cause vomiting, which was that easy without nausea. So I wanted that time. So the first thing I did was I gave an intercurrent to the child. Now I generally do that in most kids whenever I see there is a strong miasmatic influence and there is a strong causative factor. I generally start with an anti-miasmatic. So that's what we did. So the first prescription the child got was tuberculinum 1 ml in split doses, and I explained to the mother to collect the medicine next week or if there is an acute in between, because at that point in time the child was okay, right? 7 days later the mom calls me and says after the dose he slept the whole night for the first 5 days, which was like a miracle because they have not had a sleep since about 5 to 6 months. And then on the 6th night he started tossing and turning again. So I thought we'll wait and watch and see what comes from this, because I thought the tuberculinum was still doing something there, right? And then the mother comes after 15 days and she says the child has acute fever. The fever was around 39 and he had developed this croup since about a day or so before. They had been to the GP, he had prescribed antibiotics, and he had this vomiting every time he was eating, and he was coughing quite severely. And the appetite was down and the mom was worried. But she did not want to give antibiotics at that point. So that was when we decided to start with the homeopathics. And then I had an acute totality at that point. So this was the totality. He had cough. So I used Bonninghausen repertorization. This is my key repertory to use whenever I'm faced with any fever. So 99% of my cases in kids with fever, this is my default repertory, which has worked wonderfully well. So I used the Bonninghausen's repertory, and the first symptom I put in was cough, excited or aggravated by eating. The other thing was the mom had noticed a strong offensive odor from the mouth since he had been unwell. So I put in concomitants to chill, bad odor from mouth, and again I put it in general mouth symptom, odor and bad breath. Then the next symptom was cough, which was without expectoration. I put in croup, and then lastly I put in the concomitant was vomiting. So I was only looking at the acute phase of this case. I did not put any of the chronic aspect, because even though he was sleepless, he's always been sleepless, so it wasn't a part of this picture for me. And look at the remedies which come up: Brania, Ipecac, Nux vomica, Lacasis, Pulsatilla, Rustrox, and so on. Now you could imagine my surprise when I saw Ipecac there. And it wasn't just about vomiting. Ipecac was a part of everything, right from cough that started by eating to bad odor, expectoration, and so on. So I had no doubt in my mind then, and we prescribed Ipecac 200, because for me it was a much more deeper remedy than just on the acute phase. And then every time he vomits, I instructed the mom to give Ipecac. Now in the next 1 week, it was a very interesting and dramatic response that I found. He stopped vomiting within a few hours. So within one or two doses, he stopped vomiting completely, which was a very interesting thing for the mom, because he absolutely not stopped vomiting since about last few months. Now his fever remained high for 1 or 2 days, but it settled as soon as the coughing stopped. So by the next day, the appetite came back, and interestingly, the sleep got back on track again. So he slept for extended hours during the day for one entire week after Ipecac, which was a surprise for the mom because he hardly slept. And then, since then, it's been now a few weeks, I would say more than a month, and he continues to remain well. There has been no vomiting, there has been no further respiratory episodes, and the child is happy. And I think it is not a complete case, but for me, it was a huge, interesting learning because I never thought Ipecac could go beyond um, just the respiratory or the vomiting. I didn't really think I could indicate it just based on the sleep symptoms. So if this child would have come to me just with sleep problems, I would have given coffee because in my mind, coffee is sleep and Ipecac is vomiting. So if that makes sense, we tend to do that, and I think that's important too because our therapeutics and keynotes and our matura medica knowledge is on the top of our head when we are prescribing. But if you go back, you see Ipecac has a much more deeper picture, and although it hasn't come up in the provings or it has not been well elaborated, the group analysis can fill up those bits and pieces of information that could be lost because the remedy wasn't proved enough. Hope this gives you some insight, some food for thought, and some tools to basically go and expand your matura medica and look at a remedy beyond an acute and a chronic. So thank you very, very much. I hope you enjoyed this case and got a lot out of it. And I look forward to your comments and your feedback and your experiences on acute and chronic prescriptions. Thank you very much. Take care.